about what inspired the work on the walls in here. I don't really know where to start. There are lots of little tricks hidden amongst the things that are obviously artworks, because I'm interested in the relationship between things that are supposed to be in gallery spaces and things that aren't. So some of my tricks are things like this, and the plug socket down here with flashing red light on it, which is sort of playing with the idea of health and safety nightmares really. And the plug socket on the wall down there, which also has a little blinking red light on it, which again is a sort of parody of the rules about public exhibition spaces, and just toying with that a little bit really. But the sort of key visual pieces of work, I suppose I could start with this one. I've sort of, just to remind you what it is, I call it a bank flower. But it's obviously based on a sort of neoclassical design, which is influenced by the house next door. So obviously I know it's Simon Brewster as well. And next door, the architecture. I don't know if you get a chance, it's really worth a look. There's a lot of embellishment in terms of the architectural forms, and lots of neoclassicism, where they've sort of taken influences from classical Rome and Greece in this idealised way. So I've reinterpreted my idea of neoclassicism. But all mine are made out of bank advertising leaflets, all the sort of materials that you pick up in bank foyers and nothing. So I've sort of basically stumbled on it, really, which I love the idea of stealing from banks, albeit in a very petty way. And I try to make something that is sort of decorative and abundant and sort of edging towards pattern and beauty out of something that is the opposite of beautiful, i.e. advertising, i.e. bank-associated materials. And also there's a lot of crud and swarf and scurf on the pieces when you look at it closely, so they're very raw and sort of dirty looking. Some of them have got little rust patches on them where they cooked in my studio for a few weeks, and they're quite sort of ugly close up, but then you stand back and they become patterned and pretty and decorative. So I'm interested in that little threshold, if you like, between things being ugly and beautiful, I suppose. One of the things I'm interested in. Also, obviously, this relates to the architecture of this space too. So, rather than it hanging centrally on a sort of imaginary picture line, like the works are on that, which is sort of, is it 150, Jeffrey? 150C? Yeah. That sort of classic line. This is much more related to the architecture of the building, because I didn't want it to look like a picture. I wanted it to look like an object that was supposed to be in here. And similarly, this piece follows the same sort of theme, really. And again, if you get close up, you can see that HSBC kindly supplied the material for this artwork. And NatWest were the other benefactors, unknowing benefactors to my work in here. I had a lot of assistance last week to hang these, because these are all, I'll give the game away so you can see, they're all just suspended on nails. Very delicately done, and I made very careful maps at home on tracing paper, and an excellent technician helped me last week basically translate the map onto the wall, and before last week I'd never seen them on a wall before, so it's really exciting for me to see them in an architectural space instead of lying on the floor, which is where they've been ever since that. But this follows the same thing. It's again architectural, sort of influenced by neoclassicism. It's about being decorative, but actually it's made of crap. I think it's, refuse, I think. Worse than refuse. I mean, these papers from banks are worse than useless, because you can't even draw on them, because they're full of all the stuff that banks are desperate to tell you. So they're sort of even lower grade than that. And the fact that they've been taken from a bank foyer makes them even lower grade. So it's the clash of value, if you like. Low value material imitating high value, high status pattern making. I think there's a relationship I'm interested in here between the idea of decoration being a status symbol as well. And I think when Sohn was creating a lot of the embellishments next door in the main house, perhaps not him, I sort of trust him more than many, but I think a lot of people would use neoclassical design as a way of showing off their wealth and their status. So it would be a status symbol. So again, the relationship between money and using bank materials and status symbol is another little key point that I'm interested in exploiting.
Are they painted, or are they just did you paint them?
No, they're just as they come out the bank. Yeah. So what I do is I get a wad of about 40 of them, pin them together, soak them overnight, maybe sometimes for 2 days if they're heavy card, sculpt them into patterns, dry them, varnish them, and then get on a bandsaw, if you know what bandsaws are, big technical zzz like this, and slice them up, like some sort of mechanical process, and that's where you get all the little tats and scruffy marks, and so that's the process of making them really. I was just really surprised when I started making them how sort of each one's different because the whole process is very hand-spun, and again the handcrafting of it is a direct sort of contrast to the idea of banking and multinationals really, that sort of the individuality of making something by hand, contrasting with, well, HSBC who, sort of things across the world really. So it was that little contrast that interested me there as well. I'll move on. This is a piece of work which I planned for several months, this brown tape. It's pretending to be where a shelf came down, where a shelf was removed. And I'm quite interested in gallery spaces, how you can see the last show, the little print of the last show on gallery walls. And I don't mean to be picky or anything, Jackie, but you can see little spots and specks, and there are little plaster patches up here. And we decided not to paint them over in the end. There's a sort of archaeology on the space, and I wanted to take that to an extreme really. So I built this to imitate the archaeology of where a shelf was. It's actually completely fake. So that's another one of the tricks really. It's another one of the little questions about what makes an artwork, and how important is the intent behind the artwork. So this is brackets, and it's got sulphate stains, and it's brown gum strip, which is a classic sort of gallery material as a means of sealing up. Anyone who works in the gallery will know that material. So it's pretending to be an accidental mark, but in fact it's very carefully contrived. And I called it horizon because I wanted people to realise that actually it can be read figuratively. You can look at it and think, well, there's a mountain and there's a fence post, and that leads me on to this run on the wall really, because these also are all playing the idea of contrivance, really, pictorial representation. So what initially is a very chaotic, grab a thistle of weeds, slam under some perspex, underneath a piece of refuse wood, and the whole thing is very crude and ugly and uncared for. But when you start looking at it in terms of a landscape, for instance, and the title will give you that, so you suddenly start reading that as a horizon line, then it starts taking all these romantic associations to do with maybe the wind blowing through something. So how something can apparently be random and ugly and chaotic can actually start slipping into being pictorial and representing things in quite a romantic sort of English traditional way. This is also a sort of challenge to picture making, and this space tends to have framed artworks in it. A lot of community work, and that's mine at local, so mine works community work as well. Lots of schools work, but lots of things in frames. So this is a sort of challenge to that really, because it's the crudest, ugliest piece of framing you could think of. It's a piece of found material, it's thrown away, it's taken out skips and things like that. And all these pieces are made from uncrafted materials, if you like. I'll start with this one. It's a piece of copper plate that's been mounted over a piece of heavy plywood. And again, the wood is found very crude. The copper plate took me about 3 hours to sculpt. And when you look at this closely, you'll see a tiny little English landscape horizon line running along the bottom. But again, apparently, it looks like the metal's been ripped. It looks like the whole thing's just been torn. It looks like an accidental mark. But when you actually look at that mark, I've carefully followed a tree and a building and a little telegraph pole and all the sort of detailing that goes on in a classic English landscape. So again, this was between worlds about being uncontrived, accidental, found, and then controlled. And then once you spot the bit of control, suddenly that starts becoming cloud patterns, those become rushes or reeds or grasses, and the whole thing becomes figurative and starts having pictorial references. So it's that little crossover point that I'm excited by, really. Similarly with this one, again it's titled some sort of